J. Edgar Hoover, who was, through all this period, the FBI director in charge of our counterintelligence stuff. What is his role? He was an avowed anti-communist through this entire period. What did he know about these efforts, and why did he not do things to, I know he was in a balance of power with FDR, but what was going on? It would seem to have been his role to expose this.
Well, it's a very good question. One thing I'd like to say, yes, he was a very well-versed and adamant anti-communist, and really, I think that the pushback that we did have is largely due to the efforts of these unsung FBI agents. You have to remember, the FBI can't really do anything. The Justice Department has to bring the indictments and so on. And there were cases where communist subversion was uncovered by the FBI, and the Justice Department of the day covered it right back up again. One would be the Amerasia case, which was a case that was discovered of spying that was very, Stanton Evans writes about this in both his books, Blacklisted by History and the new book, Stalin's Secret Agents, in terms of a case where they had the goods on a spy ring. If it had been pushed forward as it should have been, it would have perhaps prevented the communization of China and the millions and millions of people who would be killed, 40 million people killed by Mao, something like along those lines. But you had problems in the political side where you can actually indict. He didn't know everything that was going on. And I would say that with bringing one anecdote, which I think is very powerful against Harry Hopkins, and that was the FBI in 1943, it was a very instrumental year in 1943, found itself eavesdropping for the very first time on what would become the atomic spy ring case, the codenamed Enormous. And they were listening in on a conversation out in Berkeley, which is where a lot of the research was being done that would feed into the Manhattan Project eventually. And he heard a senior Soviet diplomat having a conversation, or he didn't personally, but he was reported by the agent, a diplomat talking to a known American underground agent by the name of Nelson, and basically telling him, giving him money and telling him to infiltrate the defense industries. And essentially, this was the very first FBI inkling of what they would realize later was the atomic ring. And J. Edgar Hoover wrote a letter about this incident. It was so important to Harry Hopkins and President Roosevelt. So that shows you how important Hopkins was right there. This letter, confidential letter, came over and outlined who the Soviet diplomat was. He was not a diplomat. He was one of the top Comintern agents. He was the senior. He goes through his dossier in no uncertain terms and tells him that, this is what's going on, and please tell, the president, or I think it says you and the president need to know this. Well, the Matrokin Archive tells us, not American records, the Matrokin Archive makes note of this moment in history and tells us that what Harry Hopkins did with that information was to go to the Soviet embassy with it and tell them that the FBI was eavesdropping on this. I mean, what terms did he use? Did he say they're eavesdropping on your atomic ring? We don't know what he said, but he basically blew the FBI's cover. So Hoover apparently did not understand what Hopkins' role was, but they were on to much of this, much of the preparation. I believe we can probably say of the hearings, the very famous communist hearings, the Hiss Chambers hearings, the parade of witnesses that Elizabeth Bentley's testimony would bring to the Congress in the late 1940s was probably based on a lot of the FBI's work. So they were, I think, the short answer would be they could only do so much. Oh, but one other point in that quickly is that we don't have anyone like that at our FBI today. So in many ways, even with this communist, no, really, I mean, it's funny, but it's true. I mean, at least in those days, you had an anti-communist heading the internal security agency of the FBI. Today, we have absolutely the opposite. So they were better off.